Yeah, I mean, the number one thing that we spend time on is just reminding people that consumer protection is supposed to be about consumers. I've talked to your new Attorney General, Dave Sunday, and, he asked me at one point, what's the most important thing to fix after Josh Shapiro in the consumer protection space. And I said, it's simple. Just remember that it's everyday people that you're supposed to be helping, and that at the end of the day, you should send a check to them. At the end of the day, they should get something out of your cases. And he understood completely that you guys had a system that just wasn't actually helping people. It was about grandstanding, right? To your point, it was about going to higher office. It was about taking away somebody's product. It's all about changing people's mindsets. We've had a lot of luck with the Shady trial or pipeline reports. Montana, you got a new attorney general who came in and fired left-wing trial lawyers in Iowa and in Kansas. We're starting to wake people up, because the little-known story in all this was they had done their lawfare so deep into the system that a lot of Republicans were employing these very same lawyers.
Yes.
Even right now in Mississippi, in Kentucky, you've got, Republicans who got multi-million-dollar contracts with these Shady 8 lawyers. Now, we've made a lot of progress. We're actually getting them, people are waking up and firing these firms. But that's the thing that was so crazy, is they had so conquered this space that we had Republicans, or at least people who identify as Republicans, funneling millions of dollars to 99% donors to Democrats.
No, but were the Republicans do it unwittingly, or were they just still also gaming the system too?
I'll tell you, I get asked that question all the time, and I will tell you it's always a little bit of both, right? This is where, before we did a lot of education, nobody had a plan for consumer protection, right? There's a lot you can do with consumer protection to go after woke companies and return checks to consumers, right? But that's a new concept. For a long time, I think people just didn't pay attention to the space if you were a conservative, and that's how the left got in deep, right? This. They always love to pay attention to spaces that no one else is paying attention to and get their claws in really deep. And that's exactly what happened in this space. And then, if I'm being honest, there's some people who they'll tell me, "Oh, I have that law firm because they gave $20,000 to my state party." Right? They gave Republican money, and I'll always say to them, you're the cheapest date in the world because of $20,000 that you think they're your friend, when that same law firm's given $2.2 million to Democrats and 99% to Democrats at the federal level. So way to go, right?
Right.
And that's that guy who I told you about, that story I just said. That's an official in a state where one of these firms spent like $1 million to protect Sherrod Brown, right? And the same person is telling me it's okay to give $20,000 to the Ohio Republican Party, right? And it's just like it's some combination of like willful ignorance, maybe it's worse, maybe to your point, there's something else happening. But at the end of the day, it's either incompetence, willful ignorance, or something shadier than that.
Yeah, or corruption, just like the Democrats, only they're settling for pennies on the dollar compared to what the Democrats are getting. So I know you guys fired off warning letters to Republican attorneys general in the different states. What else are you guys doing and you got on, I know you're on with Ben Shapiro on talking about this, just trying to get the word out to help us know what can we do to hold our, we got
the number one, so I spent a lot of time just educating people. I know it sounds boring, but when I talk to Dave Sunday or I talk to somebody in your state, I just remind them that this is an easy issue, that this is easy to understand, that, you get rid of the bad guys and you focus on making consumer protection better for people. And I talk about, so basically on the Shady trial or pipeline, the easiest thing to do is just anytime you run into a local official, and it can be a state legislator, it can be, your attorney general. I know he's out and about with the people as much as he can. Just remind them and say, hey, you got to make sure that we're actually getting checks from our cases, and you got to make sure that we're not funneling money to Democrats, right? One of the big lessons we've learned from Doge in D.C. is how much of the left's establishment lives off of government contracts.
The other thing is how many of these cases, one thing we can say, you fired off a letter to the state attorneys general telling them to cut ties with these firms, isn't that another way of saying stop bringing so many of these suits because they're baseless? I mean, many of them are just plain baseless money-making suits.
Yes, I mean, bring if you're going to bring a lawsuit against one of these little companies who's actually screwing over consumers. But yeah, this is exactly right. You've got this problem of they're lining their pockets. They're not pitching you the kind of cases that are actually going to help people because they don't care about helping people, right? So if you're a public official, think about cases that'll actually help people. That's exactly right. Exactly right.
All right, a lot of stuff up. Again, Alliance for Consumers. I'm talking to O.H. Skinner, who happens to be their head of the Alliance for Consumers. And so the allianceforconsumers.org, allianceforconsumers.org, there's a lot of interesting stuff up on their website. Like, for example, they were written up in the Epoch Times about the Department of Energy postponing Biden's home appliance rules, also about unleashing domestic energy and how hard that's going to be because America's got one hand tied behind her back. This is all stuff that the Alliance for Consumers, which is actually an alliance for consumers, not a money-making machine, is doing on our behalf. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff up there. Allianceforconsumers.org. Again, O.H. Skinner.